There we go. Welcome, everybody. This is my second time doing one of these. I was chatting with some of my colleagues this morning, and someone said, Silent Disco sounds a bit like a horror film. And I'm like, yeah, it's about right. But it's actually not my first public sector summit. I'm Will St. Clair. I'm a software development manager here at AWS. I've worked with our public sector customers for the whole time I've been here at AWS. Previously as a solutions architect on our education team, and now I am the software development manager for the AWS Educate team. And if you're unfamiliar, AWS Educate is the program that encompasses how we engage with students and educators worldwide. So it allows us to connect our students and institutions with resources to put them on cloud pathways to get access to AWS so that they can experiment with it, play around, learn how to apply what they're learning in school, in addition to how to develop those cloud skills that are so important for the private sector. So today I'm going to do something I've never done before, my 5th public sector summit, which is do a live demonstration. It's no tape delay, no special effects. Plenty of people do this all the time. Of course, it's just not something I do. I went to a Share show a few years ago, and she was kind of having a rough time with her voice. Highly recommend it, but she kind of winked during the monologue and said she might need a little bit of help from the box. But I've done that before. I've taped the demo just in case it all goes wrong. I'm doing it today not because I want to pump up the drama level or anything, because I really want to show how great AWS Amplify is and how fast you can get rolling with it. Back when I was starting my career, sort of the new thing out was sort of these rapid development web frameworks like Ruby on Rails or Django. I was a Rails developer for a little while, and sort of the magic of those those systems was you could sit down and you had this command line tool that handled all this sort of code generation and scaffolding for you. And so the magic was previously if you were wiring up PHP apps or writing these big old Java apps, you had to you kind of had some templating, but you couldn't get from just sitting down. It's like, I'm going to write a new app today, and it's going to have all these features and have it be something to show my users at the end of the day. And the same way you could really with Rails when it first came out. And same thing sort of happened. Same thing is sort of happening with serverless. There's a lot of stuff going on there's a lot of benefit you get from using a serverless type architecture, modern web application type architecture. But sort of what you've sort of piecemeal lost along the way is the ability to sit down and really get everything built from soup to nuts, with best practices and everything in one way. And it's sort of like someone who easily could spend an entire day there. I mean this with love, but a lot of times when you're doing newer stuff, it feels like you're walking into Home Depot. There's great tools for it, but you could just spend all afternoon there shopping for tools, comparing, riding lawnmowers, and what you really wanted was to, spend your day in the backyard. And so what I'm going to show you today with Amplify is how you can take advantage of Amplify to build a new application rapidly without compromising on the things that are really important in application lifecycle management, like version control, security pipelines, code reviews, things like that. So let me get started. So first, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to serverless single-page applications. If you're coming from a more 3-tier architecture background, if you're familiar, then I'm going to do 3 demos. So we're going to go from soup to nuts. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to work. Creating an application with the AWS Amplify framework, how I do continuous delivery with the AWS Amplify console. This is the DevOps track, and how we can add additional AWS Amplify features to the app. So let me do a quick introduction to serverless single-page apps. So if you've been developing software for a while, you're familiar with the 3-tier architecture, right? You have the load balancer, you have your instances. If you're I've been using AWS for a little while. You auto-scale them. They scale up, they scale down. A few ways you can deploy them, and then there's a single sort of database backend. Again, you can point that at point your website at it, and you're good to go for the day. And so, as as these technologies started being easier, it became more common to start integrating other things into it. So, for example, if you had a lot of user uploads or a lot of really heavy media, you'd set up a CDN with CloudFront, alongside your application. So, instead of having to serve things directly from your application, have an NFS filer behind your app. You can put your big objects in S3, and so now you've offloaded that little bit onto your app. And so, again, this is sort of piecemeal getting there to this new architecture. And so again, with the single page app architecture, what if we just, and as sort of your front end code started to get more sophisticated, what if we just, forwent the app server as sort of the main resource, serving the main resource you need for your application. If I'm doing everything on the front end, why do I need an app server to handle the first request to the website, right? So now I can build my HTML file, I can build my JS bundle, I can build my style bundle, I can put that in an S3 bucket, I can put CloudFront in front of it, and now I can load that. And then the actual application is running in JavaScript in the browser. Again, this is not necessarily something you'd hand edit. This is something that's going to be built with libraries. And now for the actual interactive part of my application, instead of, previously you might have had an app server running the back end, instead of having an app server, I can put all that logic into Lambda functions with API gateway behind it. And so now I have an application, my application bundle, my resources from my application are being served statically from S3. My continuous deployment pipeline is publishing those files into S3. CloudFront is caching them globally. And then my actual application is the actual communication, the state transfer is happening in API gateway with Lambda. And using the same tools I can use to authenticate to my API, I can also directly call other AWS services. So I can use things like Amazon. I can have users sort of upload files directly to Amazon S3. I don't have if I'm handling user videos, right? I don't have to have have a fleet of app servers that can handle video uploads, right? I can have these clients, upload that data directly to S3, and so I can process it in the background. I can get, analytics and, pipeline user. Pipeline analysis, things like that, funnel analysis, things like that from Amazon Pinpoint, and I can use Cognito to sort of pivot from an external identity provider to those AWS credentials. So let's talk about creating a new application with the AWS Amplify framework. So there's two components of the Amplify framework. There's the Amplify command line CLI, which I'm going to show you, and then there's also the Amplify. There's three parts. There's the Amplify framework. This is the actual set of libraries that you're pulling into your JavaScript applications. It's getting bundled up into your application. You have the Amplify CLI, which is sort of your, to abuse analogy here, your Rails scaffolding. This is the thing that's wrapping all these different services and giving you sort of a seamless experience in front of it to make development easier. And then later we'll get onto the Amplify console for continuous delivery. So again, if you're familiar with Node.js, installing the Amplify CLI is easy. Just do an npm install-g AWS-Amplify CLI, and we'll do an Amplify configure. So now I will demonstrate it. So if I could switch over to my machine for the demo. So again, I'm going to install it. I've cheated, I've already installed it. So this should be relatively fast. My fear, of course, always with doing a live demo on conference Wi-Fi is, you start to do it and then, the Wi-Fi is kind of a little sketchy. Then people start pulling out their machines and streaming, the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or whatever. Then the Wi-Fi gets worse, the demo starts going worse, everyone starts streaming, and then by the end of it, no one can stream video or watch the demo, and everyone flips their things over to the talk next door, which looks pretty good. All right. So now I'm just going to run the configuration command. So this actually does a little trick. See, I've already logged into my AWS management console. I need to sign into my administrator account. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask me a region. I'm going to run in US East 1. So I'm going to create a new IAM user. So it's going to say amplify this. Then it flips open to my Opera browsing tab and sort of walks me through this process. So I'm going to hit programmatic access with my new user here. Going to give it administrator access. Going to review. And go ahead and create that user. So I'm going to create in. I'm going to do this real quickly. So again, this is going to update the AWS profile on my local machine. So if you're familiar with how your AWS profiles work, if you have an AWS big file. So I already have an Amplify profile. I'm going to just do Amplify 2 to cheat here. In cooking show form, I already have baked a version of this so that I can reference it later. So I've created this. If I revert buffer, you can see that it also reverts my font size, which is very helpful. The new profile is there. All right, so I'm going to be working, because I'm, type of person who likes best practices. I'm going to create a new Git repository for this. So I'm going to make a new directory, Amplify demo. Actually, I'm going to call this demo 2. Then I'm going to go back to the IAM console here. So if you're familiar with code commit, the way code commit works is that the SSH credential is actually tied to an IAM user. So in this case, I'm just going to create a user called code commit. I'm going to say programmatic access, and I'm going to give it code commit power user. Max tags, extra view, create user. Actually, I don't need that access key, so I'm going to go in, code commit. And then I'm going to get my SSH key. Again, same thing if you're familiar with GitHub. I think here. And so under security credentials, if you scroll down here, it's under SSH keys for down here for SSH keys for AWS code commit. Upload a public key. All right, and so I'm actually going to need this SSH key ID here real quick. Go into my SSH config. So I've actually already configured this here, but I will need to change the user. So this is my new user for this demo. And now I'm going to create a repository. So I'm going to go into code commit. Double check that we are in the region we selected, Northern Virginia. Create a repository. Amplify demo. Create. So sort of ignore this here for a second. And now in my demo directory, I'm going to initialize create my package.json. I'm going to cheat my boilerplate file here. Copy that in. So this is just saying I'm creating a new, if you're familiar with JavaScript, I'm creating a example application. That's version 1. And the dependency is just Webpack for building my JavaScript package. And now here, now I'm going to create my gitignore file so it doesn't back up my dependencies directly into GitHub. So we have our package.json on our gitignore. I'm going to install my dependencies. This is fast for conference Wi-Fi. We've advanced. Now, just go ahead this. And I'm actually going to create 2 branches here. So I'm going to do, so first I'm going to, again, this is just basic Git configuration. So I'm going to do, so now I'm just pushing at the master branch. So I'm actually going to create 2 branches. Let's see what I did. Oh. There we go. And so I've created a master branch, which is typically your default branch in Git. So this is what I'm going to use for production. So the workflow I like to use is that your master and your main line branch represents your working code that you're running in production, and then you have a dev, perhaps a dev branch or release branches that are representing sort of the current state of other environments. So with Amplify, we actually have a fully managed deployment based on this branching model, which we'll get to in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and create that second branch now. So you just do a git checkout -bdev. And then again, git push set upstream origin dev. Okay, so now we've pushed up our current state of our repo, and there's not very much there. We just created the package JSON. But now I'm going to get to coding. So I'm going to do touch index.html. Index.html, okay. So I'm going to copy paste a little bit of boilerplate here to save us time. I feel like I'm spoiling this a little bit if I let you see it. So again, this is just standard HTML. Styles are in line, a little bit of stuff here. Just like take a look at this in the browser. Not anything there yet. So got to fill out our body. So fill out our app header here. Welcome to the AWS Public Sector Summit. Got a nice gradient there, in line with the theme. I'm also going to create a separate div here. So this is just the header, and I'm also going to create a separate div for the application body. Typically, if you're going to write an application like this, you would use a component framework or UI framework like React. I wanted to really focus on sort of the wiring up. My experience is that if you sort of jump right into that, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and it can be sort of unclear what's doing what. I really want to focus on how Amplify sort of glues this stuff together. But if you were going to approach this, the Amplify documentation is a great getting started guide that shows how you would do this with React or React Native, as well as with a full mobile application. So again, create that div for the application body. All right. The second thing I'm going to do is configure my Webpack configuration file. So what Webpack is, again, without sort of belaboring the details of the JavaScript stuff, is that Webpack is going to take sort of our input source code. We have a bunch of different files. You're pulling in a bunch of different libraries. You're pulling in dependencies. That's going to spit out, if you remember from the slides, that big app.js file, right? That sort of represents the main artifact for our application. So I'm going to go in and edit my webpack.config.js. Which I might cheat. Look at my so this is code I actually got from the Amplify website. So if you go through the Getting Started guide, this is just the same code there. We're requiring the Webpack library. We're pulling it in. We have operating in development mode. This is going to handle some of the convenient stuff, like when I update my code, it's going to reload the browser. It sets up injects some code to do some cool things like that. So it just general speeds up our development cycle. I'm also going to create my application JavaScript file. So far, this is going to be blank. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start Node. So this is going to, right now, our build, our application JavaScript server is empty. There's nothing really there. But we are going to pull in the library code and sort of build a package for that. So now, rather than sort of looking at index.html, I'm going to go to localhost 8080. You can see that we are running off there. So now we have sort of a nice blank substrate. We haven't actually added any Amplify code yet, right? This is just simple HTML. So now I'm going to add Amplify to my list of dependencies. So open a new shell. And so the way you can do this, I could edit the package.json directly, but instead I'm going to use npm install. You can sort of pause your Prime videos here for a moment while it downloads. Ah, great. And now I'm going to run Amplify. So now I have access to the Amplify CLI, or Amplify command line. So I'm just going to run Amplify as the name of it, init. It's going to ask me some questions. This is sort of like old school wizard. So you enter a name for this project. I'm actually going to call this Amplify demo. I enter a name for the environment. This is my dev environment. I'm not sure what that's for. So I'm actually building a JavaScript application. I currently actually have a choice of different JavaScript frameworks depending on what you're using. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Source, dist, build. Again, remember the first thing that happened was that it walked us through creating that AWS credential to stick it on our machine. So I'm going to use yes. So I'm going to use Amplify 2 to put it into the account. So now it's saying initializing project in the cloud, right? And so if you look at this looks, you might think, if you're familiar with CloudFormation, this looks a lot like CloudFormation. Turns out that it is. So if I go over to the CloudFormation console, what the amplified code is doing is basically what it's doing is I'm creating a repository that contains all this configuration. I'm answering questions to, say what kind of what type of application I'm using, what resources I want to configure in it, what sort of plugins or features I want to configure in it, and everything. Rather than editing and managing all these massive configuration files myself, the Amplify CLI is sort of leading me down a certain path. Again, to use a Rails analogy, there's a lot of convention here over the configuration. I can go through and edit the configuration if I want to. It's not all auto-generated, but it is allowing me to sort of sidestep squinting at the documentation, squinting at these big files. So then if I look at CloudFormation here, I can see that my stack is created. And so this is sort of the base stack that's going to, I'm going to do some things later that are going to add to it. So if I go into resources, I can see that it actually hasn't created a whole lot. It's created an S3 bucket, and it's created 2 IAM roles, an authenticated role and an unauthenticated role. If you're familiar with Cognito, we will be using Cognito here in a little bit. Basically what this is saying is I'm creating two principals in my AWS account. One is going to represent the permissions that an authenticated user to my application has, and another one of these principals is going to represent the permissions that an unauthenticated user has. And the reason I need a principal to represent my unauthenticated user is because I'm going to be making calls to do things like analytics. I want what is happening when you install an analytics package on your website? Well, it's making API calls from the client's front end. If you're making API calls, you need to authenticate them somehow. So the way it works is that that end code is going to go to the Cognito service, get a temporary credential that sort of represents this anonymous user, and then use that as the credential to the analytics service. So that's just what's going on here. I'll go into a little more detail in a moment. All right. So now I've done that. Gonna make this shell really big. So again, I talked about the Amplify CLI tool. We already ran Amplify init to initialize our project. And so it's, actually if I do a git status, we'll be able to see that it's actually added a lot of things to my repository. It's updated the git ignore file. If I do, it's to, exclude the things that are being built. It's, as you might expect, we've updated our package and package lock. These contain our dependencies. And then we've also added a bunch of new stuff. The Amplify directory, the source. I added the source directory. But again, adding some additional state so I can track that. So now I'm going to just run the Amplify command, alone to see what it can do. So first, you'll notice the gratuitous use of ASCII art. But also just a list of our subcommands, right? We've already run init, we've already run configure, and some of the commands we'll use later. So this is push. Push is pushing any configuration we've made locally into our environment. Status is going to show us, what we've done. A few other utilities. Right now we don't have anything pending. This is the category of category features we can add. So you can say analytics. So this is using Amazon Pinpoint, allows us to get information from, or allows us to see how people are using our application. API is going to allow us to sort of run backend code. Again, the authentication thing I mentioned, function for writing backend code. A few other things. I'm going to focus on those. So let's start by adding analytics to our application. So I'm going to do Amplify add analytics. So Pinpoint again is the service. We're going to go through here. So the Pinpoint resource name, I actually have to change this. It doesn't like the dash. So it's also informing me that I've already added, I want to add the analytics category. Auth is a requirement. So the answer is yes, I would like guest and unauthenticated users. And so now if I do an Amplify status, we'll see that. These are pending. So I want to go ahead and push that. So again, if I jump back to the CloudFormation console, I can see that we've sort of created these substacks. And while this is running, I'm going to go ahead and handle my Git stuff. So I'm going to go get demo2, Git status. Be a little generous here. Just to make sure, yeah. This actually happens pretty quick. So let me go back to my index.html. Again, sort of the very first thing that the browser is going to download. So we've created this application. We have an app header, we have an app body, but we're not actually including the JavaScript package we're importing. So right before the end, I'm going to do a script circ main.bundle.js script. And then I'm going to go into my app.js to add. Again, I'm going to cheat. Auth and analytics, the two packages I just added. So we're just importing these. So this is actually pulling in just a JSON file that configures our specific application. We're going to configure authentication. We're going to configure analytics. And so in my application, I'm going to add here in my application body button. So this is Let's create here and then an empty div to put my response in. And so now, if I go back to my application, you can see here that I've created a button, but it's not really doing anything. So I need to go back, wire it up. So here my app.js. So what did I just paste in? So we're grabbing the analytics result div, which I just added. We're grabbing the button. We're defining a counter for event sent. And then we're just adding a listener to that button that says on click, I want to record an Amplify demo event. And I'm just going to count the number of events I've sent. So this is obviously, if you're familiar with analytics tools that allow you to instrument things within the JavaScript of your application. So you can say like, oh, the user searched this many times, they scrolled the page this many times. It looks like it seems like they're having a hard time. They're not finding the product on the page or whatever. So this is simply just creating a custom event that we can record. So now if I reload and click Generate Analytics Event, you can see that I'm now sending events. And so then if I go over to the Pinpoint console, I can see that engagement on my site is in hockey stick growth mode. And then if I go to events, I can see, give it a second to load. Those will actually may take a second to populate. It's recorded the session start. I'll come back in a second for the demo event. So let me update my Git repository. So we can now close, oh, I always forget about that. So we can close that one off our sprint. Our marketing team will be happy. The detailed analytics that our application now has. So we're going to push that up. So actually, if I could go back to the slides for a second, let me talk about continuous deployment and continuous delivery in AWS Amplify. All right. So the AWS Amplify console, one of the cooler things about it is that it actually has a fully integrated continuous delivery system. So this is based off of a Git repository. It can be a code commit repository. It can be an externally hosted repository. And it's based on a simple branch-based deployment model. So what that means is that, as I discussed earlier, if you're working off your master branch that represents or can represent your production version of your application, and you can create one or more environments feeding into that that represent your pre-production environments. That could be your development environment, that could be your staging environment, that could be your user acceptance testing environment. I've worked in places where there's only two, dev and prod, and I've worked in places that had a half dozen or more different environments depending on sort of where the release was in the cycle. So there's no limit on the number of environments you can create. And if you're familiar with some of our other tools, it's very more explicitly based off that Git repository. So the same way you would use a code review pull request process to sort of gate changes into these other branches, this is also gating your deployments. So again, I fork off the master branch, I start working on my dev branch, and then when I'm ready, I submit a pull request in the code commit console. So let's walk through that real quick. Back to the demo. Great. Got it. So this is cool. This is still running on my machine. I want to deploy it out so I can share it with my colleagues. So let me go over to the Amplify console for the first time. So again, just search that on the AWS homepage. And again, so we get two choices here. I've talked about developing with the Amplify framework, and I'm going to deploy with the Amplify console. So I'm going to hit click and get started. I have my choice of services, but I've already set up code commit, so we're going to go next. It's noted that we've recently updated our repositories, our dev branch. Next. So would you like Amplify console to deploy the changes to these resources with your front end? Environment is dev. Going to need to create a service role here in the IAM console for Amplify. This is just giving Amplify permission to make changes to my environment. Go here. It's just showing what the build settings for our application is. Noted that we're using Webpack, and our branch is dev. So I'm going to hit save and deploy. All right, so this is going to sit here and build. So while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how I would pull this into master. So let's say we're in a hurry, we're going to pull this all the way to production. So if I go into code commit, go into my repositories, if you're familiar with other systems, they also have pull requests. And in code commit, they work similarly. So I'm going to go into code commit, Amplify demo, up here at the top, create, I'm going to go to dev, and then create pull request. So pull into master from dev. Currently no conflicts between dev and master. Say version 1, added analytics button. Create engagement. And again, you can just see, go through here, review the diffs and everything, make sure that everything is as you expect. And you'll notice that a lot of this stuff is stuff that's been generated by the Amplify command. So these are all CloudFormation templates that I didn't have to write, that are managed for us by a much simpler parameters file that Amplify manages. So I'm going to go ahead and create that pull request. Then I'm going to put on my code review hat. I'm going to go ahead and merge it. It's going to ask me, this is actually a new code commit feature. If you weren't aware, you previously only did fast forward merges. You can actually choose to do a squash merge or a three-way merge now. I'm going to not delete my source branch and hit merge. So dev is merged into master. So let's check on my build here. So we are building So while that's building, I'm going to, again, cheat to save time. Go ahead and create another branch or another environment based on our master branch. So we're going to go there. Save and deploy. So now our dev environment has been built. And you can see it gives us this little preview here. In case you run into an issue with it, you can sit here and look at the log output, similar to code build. There's two different build processes. There's a bunch of stuff that happens on the back end and some stuff that happens on the front end. And this is the really cool part. It automatically builds these previews for your for different devices. So I've built this. We have screenshots. It's not as super detailed. It just uses headless Chrome, but it is giving you a preview of what this is going to look like on your different devices. So again, really, the focus is on this rapid development environment, right? I go back. That is building in master. All right, so if I could jump back to the slides here for a little bit. Could I jump back to the slides? Perfect. So there's a bunch of different features that you can add from Amplify to your application, right? It's certainly nice to have a static website with analytics on it. That actually would represents a lot of CMS use cases if you're sort of building your CMS based on static files. But what most people are going to be interested in is an application that can actually do something. And so that's actually just a demo. And so we're going to next demonstrate adding Amplify features to our application. I thought I had a slide there. Can I go back to the demonstration? All right. So again, if we're running the Amplify command, I'm going to add authentication to our application. So you've noticed that if we do an Amplify add auth, it's going to warn us that auth has already been added to this project because authentication was actually a prerequisite for analytics because we need to do an unauthenticated identity. So I'm just going to do Amplify auth update. And so this is actually, I want to be careful here, so I'm going to walk through the auth configurations manually. And so you can see it's warning me that I need to be careful. And so I want users sign up and sign in. So I'm going to allow users to create accounts on my application. Do I want to allow unauthenticated logins? Yes, because I'm currently using that. I want to enable third-party authentication providers. So one thing I could do is integrate with a third-party authentication provider, do login with Facebook, login with Google, things like that, login with Amazon. For here, I'm going to do no. It's going to ask me to name my user pool. It's going to ask me if I want to configure multi-factor authentication. So I can have users, require them to set up a cell phone for text off. That's off for now. Again, email-based registration. So, depending on your workflow, you may want. Oh, could I get my? My watch said we might be done. I thought I had until 35 after, but that might not be true. In conclusion, AWS Amplify. Allows you to sort of tie together all these different services. When you're building modern web applications, you can host your content statically in S3. You can do your compute and your resources in API gateway. No servers, no application servers, no auto scaling groups. And Amplify really ties this together in a way that's hasn't been done before, and it makes this experience just a lot more fun, like a lot more like developing like it used to be. And so I really like it, and I think you should try it too. Thank you for coming.